This video is part 3 of a 4-part video series in which the videos need to be watched in chronological order. Links to the other videos are in the description box below this video. It is absolutely necessary that you watch part 1 first. Part 1 is titled Harrison Ford's Copter Crash equals NASA's copter will crash on Mars on April 9th. Make sure you watch part 1 first, this amazing video, and I will leave a link to part 1 in the description box below this video. This will sound very strange, but it is predicted that NASA's helicopter on the planet Mars will crash on April 9th, 2023. The post date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is made ahead of time, as well as does this time-stamped email by Google and this forensic notes document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. And as we can see in this email and this document, this prediction was known and predicted from at least February 20th, a long time before April 9th. The 12th chapter of the book of Revelation is a story involving a red dragon that is symbolism for the Antichrist, and about a woman that gives birth to a child that is caught up to heaven. The child of the woman that is caught up to heaven is symbolism for the rescue of God's faithful servants that will be rescued from the coming persecution from the Antichrist right at the beginning of the period of the Antichrist. On May 26th, 2024, these Christians will not die, they will disappear and go to heaven. This rescue event is called the Rapture. After the Rapture rescue, the Antichrist will persecute Christians that are not rescued, and those people that will come to faith in Christ during the period of the Antichrist. The vast majority of those people that profess to be Christians today will be left behind to go through the tribulation period of the Antichrist. In the Revelation chapter 12 story, after the child is caught up to heaven, the red dragon attempts to drown the woman that gave birth to the child with a river of water, but the earth's mouth opened and swallowed the river from the red dragon. The powerful Niagara River that flows over Niagara Falls symbolizes this river from the dragon that is swallowed up by the earth. As was explained earlier, the historic barge on the Niagara River that was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls is symbolism for the rescue of Noah and his family from the flood judgment. In context of the book of Revelation chapter 12, the historic barge on the Niagara River is symbolism for the rescue of the child of the woman that was caught up to heaven, which, as was explained, the child of the woman that is caught up to heaven and rescued from the red dragon is symbolism for the rescue of God's faithful from the Antichrist. In Revelation chapter 12, verse 8, the red dragon is defeated and then thrown down to earth from heaven by the archangel Michael. Revelation 12 verse 8 hints at the date 12/8, and on 12/8, December 8th, in 2021, a woman drowned in the Niagara River, and there was a dramatic rescue attempt. The news media refers to the person that drowned as the woman or a woman, and many months after this woman drowned, her name was still not released to the public. This was also in the news, how her name was not released. And so this emphasizes how it was a woman, which points to Revelation chapter 12 and the description of, quote, a woman, unquote. In both this prophetic sign and in Revelation chapter 12, there is no name for the woman. She is simply referred to as a woman. This prophetic sign paralleled the woman that the red dragon attempts to drown with a river of water in Revelation chapter 12. The red dragon is symbolism for the Antichrist. In Revelation chapter 12, the red dragon chases the woman and tries to drown her with a flood right after the woman gives birth to a child. 9 months is the average human gestation period, and the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. In this prophetic sign, the woman's car crashed over the Niagara Falls on December 11th. And exactly 9 months later was the day of the prophetic flooding on historic Soldier Field in Chicago, the city that symbolizes the home of the Antichrist, which in Bible prophecy is symbolized by a red dragon, and as was mentioned earlier, the sliding of the Chicago Bears was symbolism for the red dragon and his angels being thrown down from heaven to earth. That is described in Revelation chapter 12, but more will be explained regarding this Chicago Bears game in another video. This is astounding confirmation that the woman that drowned in the river is a prophetic sign that parallels Revelation chapter 12 and the woman that gave birth to a child. Also, the last verse in the account of Noah's flood, Genesis 9:17, is the verse regarding God's sign regarding his covenant with man regarding judgment, the rainbow, and Niagara Falls engenders a perennial rainbow, and the Antichrist, Barack Obama, who lit up the White House in rainbow colors, who is from Chicago, was president from 2009 until 2017, and arrived in Washington, D.C. as the senator from Illinois during the 109th Congress, and lived on 109th Street while studying at Columbia University, and will return to the District of Columbia as the President and Antichrist in the 117th Congress, which ends in January of 2023. And from this flooded historic Soldier Field prophetic sign on 9/11, 2022, it is 9 times 17 days to February 17th, 2023, and February 17th is the 17th day of the second month, and it is said in the account of Noah's flood that the flood began on the 17th day of the second month, and so it is expected and it is predicted that there will be a prophetic relevant sign that will occur on February 17th, 2023. In fact, we received the prophetic sign that was predicted in advance that occurred on February 17th, 2023. This will be explained in another video. This sign is exactly 4 plus 4 plus 4 months, which hints at the 44th President Antichrist, to February 17th, 2024, the date it is predicted that the historic barge that is stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River will finally break free and crash over Niagara Falls, which will be Noah's flood symbolism and will be the big prophetic sign that is communicating that judgment destruction on the world is beginning now. God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together in order to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school and became president in 2009. Goat is Antichrist symbolism. The woman drove her vehicle into the Niagara River from Goat Island, which is right near the edge of Niagara Falls. The woman drove her car into the river and drowned exactly 230 days, which hints at the number 23, before the extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis, which, as explained, in turn is 7 days and then 40 days to 9/11, 2022, the day of the flooded historic Soldier Field in Chicago. The extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis was exactly 999 days after the historic barge moved for the first time since 1918 on October 31st in 2019 during an extremely prophetic storm and record flooding over eastern New York and western New England that killed one person, and this record flooding over eastern New York and western New England was pointing to the flight paths of the two planes that left Boston and flew into the Twin Towers on 9/11. October 31st, 2019 was the same day that the prophetic Maria fire began in California that burned 9,999 acres. In fact, this 999 days connection to July 26th, 2022 was discovered in July of 2021 and was the first clue that revealed that July 26th, 2022 would be an extremely prophetic day, which it was, and this is the reason why there is too much to explain for this video regarding, for example, the flooding in St. Louis. The Maria fire hints at Maria, which is Spanish for Mary, and Mary is known for having given birth to the most famous child in history. This is why the day that the woman drowned in Niagara Falls was exactly 110 weeks after the Maria fire began, which burned 9,999 acres, and God pairs the numbers 9 and 110 together to confirm the signs and connections and to point to 9/11. But the astounding prophetic reasons for why God pairs 9 and 110 together to point to 9/11 is explained many other times in other videos, which is why a few days after this, on the 11th of December, the car crashed over Niagara Falls exactly 9 months before the day that the barge will crash over Niagara Falls. Which is why on this same day, the barge moved for the first time since it got stuck as a result of a prophetic rainstorm that pointed to 9/11. And these prophetic signs on this day were in turn another exact 110 weeks after the prophetic sign that was the emergency evacuation in the middle of the night due to the threat of the dam bursting in Puerto Rico that was caused by damage by Hurricane Maria. Prior to Hurricane Maria pummeling Puerto Rico, the news media reported how Hurricane Maria had been dancing in the open Atlantic with Hurricane Joseph. The threat of the dam bursting forth its waters was not only Noah's flood symbolism, but it was also symbolism for a woman's water breaking, as the night that it occurred was the night of the Revelation chapter 12 sign in the night sky, which depicted a woman giving birth. Jesus' official arrival into Jerusalem and first coming was on the 10th day of the first month in the Hebrew calendar. This is 110, and this hints at the number 110. In the book of Joshua, the date on which the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan River and officially entered the Promised Land was also on the 10th day of the first month, which is 110 and hints at the number 110. Jesus' first coming is symbolized by the number 110. This is why on 9/11, the two towers that collapsed were each 110 stories high. The collapse of two towers that were 110 floors was symbolism for Jesus' second coming. In the book of Joshua in the Bible, Joshua died at the age of 110. Joshua led the Hebrews around the security walls of the ancient city of Jericho before they collapsed in judgment. On 9/11, the Twin Towers, which were 110 stories high, collapsed, engendering a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall, where George Washington was inaugurated, on Wall Street. President George Washington was a founding father, and his inauguration as the first president was a symbolic founding of the nation. The cracking of the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street on 9/11 symbolized America's foundation in God being cracked. This is because after Washington's inauguration at Federal Hall, he then walked down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel, where he consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its blessings. After 9/11, Trinity Chapel was called the Miracle Chapel, as it was the only building at Ground Zero to have survived. It did not even suffer a broken window due to the 70-year-old sycamore tree that was uprooted as it sheltered the chapel from the falling debris. In commemoration of this sycamore tree outside the chapel, today there is a huge bronze statue of its roots. In other words, through the 9/11 events, God was pointing to Trinity Chapel and Washington's covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. Wall Street is named after the original 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. The collapse of 110 floors that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, which is named after a 9-foot-high security wall, hints at 9/11 and points to Joshua, who died at 110, and the Hebrews that marched around the walls of security before they collapsed in judgment. 110 floors and the 9-foot-high wall of security that was Wall Street points to George Washington's march down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel that symbolized a covenantal relationship between America and God. To this effect, Washington's march down Wall Street with the New York Stock Exchange, the building that symbolizes America's financial strength, located on one side of the street, and Federal Hall, the building that symbolizes America's governmental and institutional strength on the other side, also pointed to the cutting rights ritual practiced in ancient Israel that was used in Abraham's and God's ritual walk in their covenant that is described in Genesis 15. A covenant that symbolizes Washington's walk down Wall Street and his covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. There are only two nations in the history of the world that were founded not on ethnicity or territory or language, but were founded solely for God: Israel and America. In every daily Bible that is divided into 365 readings, a portion of the Bible for each day of the year, on every September 11th, everyone that reads this standard 365-day Bible reads the passage in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 11, which is the judgment warning on ancient Israel, which was a raid on ancient Israel by the world's first recorded terrorists, the ancient Assyrians. And the terrorists on 9/11 were from the same part of the world. The Assyrians raided the northern kingdom of Israel first, and then later the southern kingdom of Judah was destroyed, which is why the terrorists on 9/11 hit the North Tower first, followed 17 minutes later by the South Tower. And this Isaiah 9:11 passage includes a mention of collapsed buildings and uprooted sycamore trees. On the morning after 9/11, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle gave a speech to the world regarding the events on 9/11. He quoted the passage in Isaiah 9:11, not realizing it was a judgment warning on the ancient Jews. He quoted how, after the raid by the Assyrians, the Hebrews did not repent to God, but instead vowed defiantly to rebuild and become stronger than before. And so, like the ancient Jews, America did not repent after the judgment warning, and instead defied God even more. And so, like ancient Israel, America will now be destroyed. This is why, in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, he frequently pairs together the number 110 and the number 9. Both of these numbers symbolize God's judgment on the nation, and paired together, these numbers point to the big judgment warning that was 9/11. As well, these numbers paired together in God's signs and connections serve as a witness confirmation that the perceived signs and connections are from God. After the judgment warning of 9/11, America was given a period of grace to repent and turn back to God, or else judgment destruction. In the Bible, a 20-year period symbolizes a complete period of waiting. Jacob waited 20 years to get possession of his wives and property, The children of Israel waited 20 years to be freed of Jabin, the king of Canaan, when they were freed from bondage by Deborah and Barak. The Ark of the Covenant waited 20 years in Kiriath-Jearim, and Solomon spent 20 years building his home and the house of God. On the 20th anniversary of the buildings that collapsed on 9/11 was the sudden collapse of America's presence in Afghanistan, and the iconic scene of this was the U.S. Air Force plane leaving the airport in Afghanistan, and the big number on the side of its plane is 1109, which hints at 110 and 9. And so, from the emergency evacuation in the middle of the night, due to the threat of the dam bursting because of damage caused by Hurricane Maria, it is exactly 110 weeks to the day that the historic barge moved for the first time, and the day that the Maria fire began that burned 9,999 acres, and God pairs the numbers 9 and 110 together to confirm the signs and connections as a second witness, and also to point to 9/11, the day that the 110 stories of the Twin Towers collapsed and engendered an earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street that was named after the 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. Also, the official death toll from Hurricane Maria is just a few people over 3,000 people. On 9/11, the official death toll was 2,996. The reason for this is because in the Bible, quote unquote, about 3,000 people perished in God's judgment when they rebelled at Mount Sinai. And the barge moving for the first time on the day of the Maria fire that burned 9,999 acres was in turn exactly another 110 weeks to the day that the woman drowned in the Niagara River. This 999 days from the day that the barge moved and 230 days from the day that the woman drowned in the Niagara River is a pairing of 9 and 23 that confirm the signs and connections. God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together in order to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school and became president in 2009. This 230 days and 999 days connection to July 26th confirms the signs and connections and reveals the identity of the red dragon Antichrist described in Revelation chapter 12, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 and became president in 2009. 230 days hints at the number 23. Again, in turn, July 26th is 7 days and then 40 days to the day of the flooded historic Soldier Field, which in turn connects to the predicted date that NASA's helicopter will crash on the red planet Mars, which in turn connects with exactly 40 weeks to the day it is predicted that the historic barge will crash over Niagara Falls. And again, the historic flooding on July 26th connects with 7 days to the death of the GOAT of baseball broadcasting on August 2nd, and then connects with 40 days to September 11th. In other words, the day that the woman drowned on the Niagara River and the day that the barge moved for the first time since 1918 both connect extremely prophetically to the day that the barge will crash over Niagara Falls. And these trails of signs go through the date of the death of the GOAT of baseball broadcasting. Also, the historic barge that is stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, and there was a dramatic rescue attempt of the woman that drowned in the Niagara River, and there were 70 rescues by firefighters in the St. Louis flooding. Again, this is symbolism for Noah's Ark and his family that were rescued in the ark before the flood judgment, and also the rescue of the child and the woman from the Antichrist described in Revelation chapter 12. As explained here, The day that the woman drowned in the Niagara River and the day that the barge moved on the Niagara River both connect profoundly 999 days and also 230 days to this extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in the city of St. Louis. And on that day in St. Louis, there were 70 rescues of residents by the St. Louis Fire Department in the emergency evacuation in the middle of the night in Puerto Rico due to the threat of the dam bursting due to damage caused by Hurricane Maria. It was 70,000 people that were evacuated. The number 70 in the Bible appears in context of God's judgment on his nation. There were 70 rescues in St. Louis because God uses the city St. Louis to point to the great American eclipse judgment warning sign. St. Louis was the biggest U.S. city within the path of totality of the eclipse, and the eclipse peaked right in the center of the country near St. Louis. And the path of totality of the eclipse was 70 miles wide. This is why a big part of the news story regarding this flooding in St. Louis that required 70 rescues was the closure of the I-70 highway, which happens to run parallel with the 70-mile-wide path of totality of the Great American Eclipse Judgment Warning sign. The reason why these prophetic signs that involve rescue symbolism connect with the flooding in St. Louis that involved rescues, one reason is that the date, July 26th, hints at 726, which hints at the 726th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for rapture. And again, the rapture event will be the rescue of God's faithful before the coming judgment from the Antichrist, exactly as symbolized in Revelation chapter 12. In Revelation chapter 12, the child that is born from the woman is caught up to heaven, and this is symbolism for the rapture. It is a rescue from the red dragon that is waiting for the child to be delivered in order to devour it. After the child is caught up to heaven, the red dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth. This will be symbolized when NASA's helicopter crashes on the red planet Mars. After Noah and his family were rescued, the floodwaters increased for 40 days. The crash of NASA's helicopter onto the red planet Mars will symbolize in Revelation chapter 12 when the red dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth after the rescue rapture of the child. And as was explained earlier, the date it is predicted it will crash connects with the day that the U.S. Coast Guard helicopter rescue was called off. And as was explained, the plane crash into Mutiny Bay was a Revelation 12 dragon thrown down from heaven to earth prophetic sign. And what I forgot to mention earlier is that there was a leak from the investigation, the National Transportation Board investigation, that seems to indicate that a malfunction in the plane's tail was responsible for it doing its nosedive, its near vertical nosedive into Mutiny Bay, which in itself is red dragon thrown down from heaven symbolism, the vertical descent. But it was a malfunction in the tail that was responsible for it. And in Revelation chapter 12, right before the child is rescued, it is said that the red dragon sweeps his tail and a third of the stars are cast down from heaven to earth, which is symbolism for Satan and his fallen angels being thrown down from heaven to earth. In other words, this vertical descent and this tail aspect of this plane crash into Mutiny Bay is more confirmation that it is a Revelation chapter 12 sign. And that plane crash into Mutiny Bay was on September 4th, and it was exactly 40 days after the extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis on the same day as the Sea Dragon helicopter prophetic sign. the flooding that occurred on the date 726, which hints at the 726th word in the Greek New Testament concordance, meaning rapture. The crash of NASA's helicopter on the red planet Mars will also be symbolizing and hinting at the upcoming crash of Kamala Harris in her plane, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist, the Red Dragon. The Antichrist Barack Obama will replace Kamala Harris. Michelle Obama will first replace Kamala Harris, and then Barack Obama will replace Michelle. And in turn, this flooding and Sea Dragon helicopters sign was exactly 40 weeks after the extremely prophetic plane crash in Harris County, which is explained in other videos, which hints at the upcoming plane crash of Kamala Harris. But the plane was on its way to Boston for game number 4 of the Boston-Houston baseball playoff series, and Houston is the 4th biggest city in the U.S., which is why it is named Harris County, because through Harris's death, the 44th president will become president again. According to the medical profession, the average human gestation period is 40 weeks. When asked by his disciples for the signs to look for of his return, Jesus replied with the metaphor of birth pains, hence why 40 weeks connections between his prophetic signs. Revelation chapter 12 describes a red dragon and the rescue of a child after its birth, which is the reason for this 40 weeks connection from the plane crash in Harris County that's pointing to Kamala Harris's plane crash to this prophetic flooding and Sea Dragon's helicopter's prophetic sign, which in turn connects with a prophetic 40 days exactly to the day of the plane crash into Mutiny Bay and the U.S. Coast Guard rescue search, which in turn connects to the day that NASA's helicopter will crash onto the red planet Mars. And so the crash of NASA's helicopter onto the red planet Mars will be symbolism for the red dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth, and Antichrist symbolism. God gave Noah a 7 days warning to load the ark before the flood judgment began. And from the day of the plane crash into Mutiny Bay, it was 7 days to the flooded historic Soldier Field in Chicago. And again, the flooded Soldier Field in Chicago connects to the day that NASA's helicopter will crash, which in turn connects with exactly 40 weeks to the day that the historic barge will crash over Niagara Falls. And earlier it was explained how the rescue attempt of the woman that drowned in the Niagara River right near the edge of Niagara Falls was 110 weeks exactly after the barge first moved for the first time. And God pairs the numbers 110 and 9 together. And so this date, 12/8, which again hints at Revelation chapter 12, verse 8, this date is connected to with 110 weeks. And in turn, it connects with 90 plus 90 plus 90 days to the vertical nosedive plane crash into Mutiny Bay that was caused by a malfunction in the plane's tail, which was a Revelation chapter 12 prophetic sign. God uses the number 90 to symbolize the number 9, the most important number in his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment, and he frequently uses the number 27, an emphasis of this number 9, 3 nines. One thing to add here regarding the date of the plane crash into Mutiny Bay, which was a Revelation chapter 12 red dragon sign, which is an Antichrist sign, is that God uses the date 9/4 and also 4/9, April 9th, to hint at 9 times 4 equals 36, which is a number that symbolizes 666, which is the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. 36 is 6 times 6, and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And also the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. And as was explained in part 2 of this video series, this date 9/4, this day of this Mutiny Bay crash, is 2,520 hours, 2,520 hours to the signs that occurred on December 18th, which included the Raiders sign, if you recall, and player 16, 44-yard line. And again, in turn, from that sign, it is exactly 4 times 4 weeks, which is 16 weeks, to the date it is predicted that NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars, which will be on the date 4/9, the inverse of this 9/4 date that was the day of the Mutiny Bay crash. And so the Mutiny Bay crash on 9/4 connects with the date 4/9 and the crash of NASA's helicopter. And that also the date 4/9, the date of the helicopter crash on Mars, will also hint at the number 36, which, as I just explained, is symbolism for 666. One reason for going into this connection to Revelation chapter 12 in this video is because of the importance of the death of the GOAT of baseball broadcasting in the connections being explained in this video. The barge will crash over Niagara Falls near Goat Island, which, as was explained, connects to the day that the GOAT of baseball broadcasting died. And again, one of the things about Vin Scully is that it is widely known that his son died in a helicopter crash, which is one reason why it is relevant that his death connects to the day that NASA's helicopter will crash. The reason why Revelation chapter 12 is relevant to Vin Scully, the GOAT of baseball broadcasting, is because Vin Scully is Revelation 12 symbolism, which I will now explain. All right, so for the next few minutes, I'm just going to go through some notes. I'm going to go off script here. The remainder of the video, after I've done explaining just for a couple of minutes Vin Scully, contains some of the most amazing information ever and is extremely important as well. So make sure you hang in there and watch the entire video. First thing to say is that the number 17 is symbolism for the GOAT Antichrist. As was explained in ancient Israel, the Jews would conduct a ritual sacrifice on the Temple Mount on the Day of Atonement using 2 goats, which is symbolism for the 2 antichrists that will be vanquished from the Temple Mount at the return of Lord Jesus Christ. The Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the 7th month, for which the number 17 symbolizes, and therefore this is why the number 17 also symbolizes goat Antichrist, the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement in 2024 will be the day of the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ and Judgment Day. Also, in Bible prophecy in the book of Revelation, the Antichrist is described using a metaphor of a beast, which has 10 heads and 7 horns, for which the number 17 also symbolizes. This is why, for example, the GOAT of football, Tom Brady, won 7 Super Bowls out of 10 Super Bowl appearances. This is another reason why the GOAT of baseball broadcasting died 17 days before the day that SpaceX's Dragon cargo ship began its descent to Earth, on the day that NASA officially announced its moon landing sites, which, as explained in part 1, connects to the day that NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars. And again, the red planet Mars is symbolism for the red dragon, the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Vin Scully, is the GOAT of baseball broadcasting, and when he played baseball in university, he wore jersey number 17. And this is a confirmation for adding 17 days to the death of Vin Scully. 17 days from his death on 8/2, August 2nd, gets us August 19th, the day that SpaceX's Dragon cargo ship began its descent to Earth, on the same day that NASA officially announced its moon landing sites, which connects to the day that NASA's helicopter will crash on the red planet Mars. And in Revelation chapter 12, the red dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth and crashes onto earth. As was explained, God pairs certain numbers together to confirm the signs and connections and to develop his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. And two of the numbers that he pairs together is 17 and 44, which is symbolism for the goat Antichrist, the 44th president. This 17 days will pair with the 4 times 4 months. Again, it is exactly 4 times 4 months from the day that Kamala Harris was in High Point promoting a 2.3 infrastructure and jobs package. And that was also the day of the first flight, the historic first flight of this helicopter on Mars. 4 times 4 months exactly after that, exactly 4 times 4 months after Kamala Harris promoted 2.3 trillion, was the day that SpaceX's Dragon cargo ship began its descent to Earth, on the same day that NASA officially announced its moon landing sites, and 17 days before SpaceX's Dragon cargo ship began its descent to Earth, on the same day that NASA officially announced its moon landing sites, was the day that Vin Scully died, the GOAT of baseball broadcasting that wore jersey number 17. I explained the relevance of Vin Scully in relation to Revelation chapter 12, which describes a red dragon, which again is why the red planet Mars is also relevant. And again, the red dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth by the Archangel Michael in Revelation chapter 12. When the helicopter will crash on the red planet Mars, it will symbolize this. The first heaven is the sky. It will fall from the sky of Mars, but arguably will also symbolize falling from the second heaven, outer space. The crash of this helicopter onto Mars will symbolize when Michael threw the red dragon down from heaven to earth, as described in Revelation chapter 12. The name of Vin Scully's son that died in a helicopter crash is Michael. And so Vin Scully, who wore jersey number 17, died 17 days before SpaceX's Dragon cargo ship began its descent to Earth, on the same day that NASA officially announced its moon landing sites, which connects to the day that NASA's helicopter will crash onto the red planet Mars, which will symbolize when Archangel Michael threw the red dragon down from heaven to earth. The story regarding Scully and why he is the GOAT of baseball broadcasting is because he broadcasted for a record 67 years for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Los Angeles hints at fallen angels. Los Angeles is Spanish for the angels. In Revelation chapter 12, the red dragon is thrown down with his angels. And so the helicopter that will fall onto the planet Mars will symbolize the red dragon and his angels falling to Earth. In Revelation chapter 12, the child and the woman dodge the red dragon. Again, the child is caught up to heaven, and then the woman escapes into the wilderness and hides in the wilderness and escapes the river of water that the dragon tries to use to drown the woman. The name Dodgers comes from how, after the invention of electric trolley cars, which replaced horses, it was a brand new technology, and it was said that the men of the streets of New York were dodging the trolley cars, because at the time it was intimidating, it meant death, it was new, it was, I suppose, a little bit scary for them at the time. This is the origin of the name Dodgers, and this is relevant in context of Revelation chapter 12, and the child and the woman that dodged the red dragon. The Dodgers were at one time named the bridegrooms. The child symbolizes the bride, which is symbolism for those Christians that will be raptured or rescued from the coming Antichrist. And they will be rescued by the bridegroom, which is symbolism for Jesus. They were named the bridegrooms in 1888, which was the year that the 23rd president was elected. Those that will be rescued in the rapture will be rescued from the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23. Again, the reason why God points to the 23rd presidency is because the 22nd president, Grover Cleveland, was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. And he is using this to point to Barack Obama, who will also serve non-consecutive terms. And this is why it is relevant that the bridegrooms, or the Los Angeles Dodgers, were named the bridegrooms in 1888, the same year that President Harrison was elected. And again, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 will come to power through the replacement of Kamala Harris. What is also confirmation of this amazing relevance of the bridegrooms being named in 1888 is that God uses the number 888 in his prophetic signs to symbolize Jesus. In Greek, the letters of Greek are also numbers, just as Roman letters are also numbers, and the numeric equivalent of the name Jesus is 888. And in case it wasn't clear enough for those that may be not familiar with the Bible, in the Bible, the church is symbolized by the bride and Jesus that comes for his church. In the resurrection rapture event, for example, is symbolized by the bridegroom. And so you can do the math of the team, the odds of the team being named bridegrooms that then ended up moving to Los Angeles, which hints at the angels, in the same year that the 23rd president was elected in 1888, 888, and the name Jesus. You can calculate the probability of that, and you will find that it is a huge number. Vin Scully broadcasted for 67 years, and again, the number 67 symbolizes the unification of man with God. When we die and go to heaven, or when we are raptured, we are resurrected into our resurrected eternal bodies, and through Christ's Spirit, we become like Christ, and Christ is God dwelling in a human body. The great sign in heaven that is described in Revelation chapter 12 is a description and sign regarding the rapture. Those that will be raptured will be rewarded for their faithfulness in their lifetimes. In a sense, it will be an award. Vin Scully attended Fordham University, where he played baseball and wore jersey number 17, and the Fordham University radio station that Scully founded while he was attending the university presents a Lifetime Achievement Award each year. The bridegrooms were named in 1888. The number 8 is symbolism for the next higher level and a new beginning. Scully died in Hidden Hills, California. The child was hidden from the dragon, as was the woman hidden in the wilderness from the dragon. Those that will be raptured will be hidden from the Antichrist, which is why Scully died in Hidden Hills. Scully's son Michael died in a helicopter crash while investigating an oil pipeline for a company named Four Corners Pipeline. In Revelation chapter 7, the angels at the four corners of the earth hold back the four winds until the 144,000 are raptured. Scully's son Michael was investigating possible pipeline damage after a 6.6 magnitude earthquake near Northridge, California. In the Bible, the enemy comes from the north, and the constellation Draco, which is symbolism for a dragon, sits at the celestial North Pole. The 6.6 magnitude is also symbolism for the Antichrist, that is described in the last and 66th book in the Bible, in which it uses the number 666 as symbolism for the Antichrist. Revelation chapter 12 is about a birth of a child. On the same day that the goat of baseball broadcasting died, on August 2nd, was the same day that the state of Kansas voted to keep abortion legal. Which is also why, given that Vin Scully is Revelation chapter 12 symbolism, and Revelation chapter 12 is about a birth of a child, he died on this day. This day, August 2nd, was 1,290 days after the blood moon over the AFC Championship football game in Kansas City. In Daniel chapter 12, the 1,290 days is in context of an abomination, which is what abortions are. That prophetic football game was a prophetic sign that involved the number 23. That game is known for how it went into overtime, and in Tom Brady's winning drive, he 3 times threw 2 passes that were incomplete and then completed a third one to make a first down. This happened 3 times in a row. This was 2 and 3, second down and then third down, that was repeated, this pattern, which hinted at the number 23, which again is hinted at with 2 and 3. This all pointed to the Super Bowl that followed this on the date 2-3, which was filled with patterns of 2 and 3, and was exactly 2,300 days, which is a period of days in context of the Antichrist in Daniel chapter 8, which is a prophecy about a goat versus a ram, and Tom Brady the goat played the Rams in this Super Bowl after the 23rd anniversary of the 1989 World Series earthquake, which was a major prophetic sign. And on the 23rd anniversary, a huge fireball flew at low altitude over the Bay Area. And that isn't even all of the 23s there. But the point is that the AFC Championship game that was played in Kansas City was about the number 23, and it connects with 1,290 days, as was just explained, to the death of Vin Scully on the day that Kansas voted to keep abortion legal. Oh, and I forgot, on the day of that Super Bowl, a plane crashed in Yorba Linda, California, which Harris tweeted about because at the time she was the senator from California. And it crashed in Yorba Linda, the home of the Richard Nixon Presidential Library. And Richard Nixon was the only president to use the 25th Amendment to appoint Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was the only president that was never elected vice president or president, just like how Barack Obama won't be elected this time, which is how he will overcome the 22nd Amendment's restriction on someone from being elected to the office more than twice. He will be appointed instead, just like Gerald Ford was appointed. And the big commercial in this game of the Super Bowl was the Amazon commercial about a blackout starring Harrison Ford as himself, which hints at the death of Kamala Harris and President Harrison, and Ford, Gerald Ford, the other president. Harrison Ford is known for his aviation mishaps, and this is why his 2 names are Harrison Ford. It's pointing to the death of Kamala Harris, and through her death will come the Antichrist, who will be appointed just like Gerald Ford. And the day of this Amazon commercial, on the day of the Super Bowl, on the day of the plane crash in Yorba Linda that Harris tweeted about, and the day of the commercial about a blackout, the Amazon commercial starring Harrison Ford, this was exact on the date 2-3, which hints at the number 23. This was exactly 23 weeks before Harrison Ford's 77th birthday on the day of the Manhattan blackout, which is a huge prophetic sign. And that in turn is exactly 23 weeks to the day that Harrison Butker, the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, kicked a double doink, a prophetic double doink from the 23-yard line with the score at 23. And this was hinting at the double doink presidency of Barack Obama, who wore jersey number 23. There are a number of prophetic doinks that were all called by legendary sports broadcaster Al Michaels, which hints at the Archangel Michael in Revelation chapter 12, some of which I will explain in a minute. And Vin Scully had a son named Michael that died in a helicopter crash.
Harrison Butker now for the extra point. Off the upright. That's a double doink right there. And no good. Beginning to think that goalpost is magnetized.
Double doinks are symbolism for the double presidency, the second presidency, the double doink, the return of Barack Obama, the Antichrist, to Washington, D.C. and the White House as president. And this double doink was kicked in Chicago exactly 50 weeks after the extremely prophetic double doink kicked in Chicago in the playoff game. The Antichrist, Barack Obama, is from Chicago. 50 weeks symbolizes the church. The number 50 symbolizes Pentecost. Pentecost symbolizes the church. Fire symbolizes Pentecost. And Pentecost is known as the Feast of Weeks, hence 50 weeks connections. And the Kansas City Chiefs symbolize fire, their color, their uniform, and also their 50th years between their two Super Bowls, etc. It's explained in other videos, but Kansas City also symbolizes the church, and all of this is symbolism or communicating judgment for the church, the American church, which is also, by the way, the reason why it was Tom Brady and the Patriots in that AFC Championship football game when the blood moon was over the stadium during the game against Kansas City. A second reason why 50 weeks connections are symbolism for judgment on the church, especially when they connect church judgment warning symbolic signs, is that 50 weeks is also exactly 350 days, and the 350th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word for examine or judge, to investigate, examine, inquire into, scrutinize, sift, question, to interrogate, examine, to judge, estimate, determine the excellence or defects of any person or thing, as in the church. Because we are talking about Revelation chapter 12, and we are talking about in this video the barge on the Niagara River, and it being symbolism tied to Revelation chapter 12, and the rescue of God's faithful, which is symbolized again by the child that is caught up to heaven in Revelation chapter 12, and the archangel Michael that throws down the red dragon in Revelation chapter 12. Well, one of these prophetic doinks that Al Michaels called, again, was involving the Kansas City Chiefs. This was a single doink in December of 2021, on December 5th, exactly 40 weeks before the flooded historic Soldier Field in Chicago and the sliding bears prophetic sign. When Jesus was asked by his disciples for the signs to look for of his return, he used the metaphor of birth pains, and according to the medical profession, the average human gestation period is 40 weeks, hence why God uses 40 weeks connections. But again, Revelation chapter 12 is about a birth, and again, the sliding Chicago Bears on the flooded Soldier Field in Chicago was symbolism for the dragon and his angels being thrown down from heaven to earth, and it was a Revelation chapter 12 sign, as was explained earlier. Now, as I will explain in a minute, the Kansas City Chiefs in all of this is judgment for the church, as the Kansas City Chiefs is symbolism for the church, as I will explain. And this doink was kicked with exactly 2 minutes and 22 seconds remaining on the clock to make the score 10-0 against Denver. The reason for 2 minutes and 22 seconds is this is hinting at a series of twos, and again, God uses the number 22 as symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which the inverse of which would have been the Tav mark described in Ezekiel chapter 9, and the Tav letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the last and 22nd letter, and the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book in the Bible, that is the 22nd of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Also, the Chiefs' prophetic Super Bowl win was on the date 2-2, which hinted at the number 22, and their legendary coach finally won his first Super Bowl game, and it was his 222nd win, which was one of the main headlines after the game, was how it was his 222nd win and he had finally won the Super Bowl. And the main big play of the game was a pass from the Chiefs' 22-yard line that was caught and received on the opposing team's 22-yard line. This was the big game-changing play of the game that was talked about after the Super Bowl. It was a pass from the quarterback, player number 15, that was caught by player number 10. 10 times 15 is 150. The name of the play was the sting play. And in Bible prophecy, in the book of Revelation, people are persecuted with stingers for 150 days. It is clear that the stingers are related to the snake bite, which is the mark of the Antichrist and is not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. And if you don't know what the snake bite thing is, look it up in the other videos on this channel. But make no mistake, the reason why God has given me a voice through the predictions being made in this video is to prove this. The reason why the score was 10-0 is because it is through the mark of the Antichrist that the faith of God's people will be tested in the end times period of the Antichrist, as is stated by Jesus in his letter in Revelation chapter 2. he says that there will be a symbolic 10 days of testing of faith. The reason why this game was against Denver is because Denver and the state of Colorado are known to be high places. Denver is the highest major city in the U.S. It is known for being a mile above sea level. In the Bible, the high places is a metaphor for false religious idolatrous worship and is also symbolism for the Antichrist and Satan. For example, in Isaiah chapter 14, it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place, a metaphor for heaven, and in Revelation chapter 12, the archangel Michael throws down the red dragon from heaven to earth, just like as Lucifer fell from heaven to earth in Isaiah chapter 14. God also uses Colorado for this symbolism and pointing to the Antichrist who will rise to power after the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, which will symbolize Satan falling from heaven to earth, Lucifer and the red dragon, and also when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Barack Obama will become president again after he will replace Kamala Harris. He will be appointed instead of elected, thus he will overcome the 22nd Amendment's restriction on someone from being elected to the office more than twice. He will be appointed instead, just like the 38th president, Gerald Ford, which is why Colorado is used. Colorado is the 38th state to join the Union. This is also the reason for this series of twos in this sign, which involves Denver from the 38th state. Again, the clock was at 2:22 when this prophetic doink was kicked. What further confirms the relevance of this prophetic doink, besides the other prophetic doinks that Al Michaels called, and the fact that double doinks or doinks in general can often be prophetic, as has been demonstrated in other prophetic signs, and importantly, Harrison Butker, this kicker, is involved with two other prophetic double doinks besides this doink. But what also confirms the prophetic relevance of this doink kicked against Denver is that it was exactly 62 weeks after the day that Chadwick Boseman died. A period of 62 weeks appears in the most central prophecy in the Bible that regards the timing of the coming of the Antichrist and the end times period of the Antichrist. The reason why Chadwick Boseman is relevant is because, well, one, it's pointing to a death, the death of Kamala Harris, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist. But Chadwick Boseman was the famous actor that played the main character in the movie Black Panther. And incidentally, this Kansas City Chiefs kicker that kicked this doink against Denver also kicked a prophetic doink against the Carolina Panthers. Barack Obama said the movie Black Panther was his favorite movie in 2016. The movie is about, it's a comic book movie, and it is about these powers that these people receive that live on this mountain. The mountain is spiritual, and it is the source of their supernatural powers. This is symbolism for the supernatural powers that will be behind the Antichrist, the satanic powers. This is a mountain. This movie is about a mountain. And Colorado and Denver is symbolism for mountain, which is symbolism for a high place, which is symbolism for Satan falling like lightning from heaven or Lucifer falling from the high place. This is why Barack Obama, the Antichrist, decided to have his Democrat nominee acceptance convention in 2008, right before he became president, in Mile High Stadium in Denver, Colorado. It was symbolism for the Antichrist, and he delivered his speech on a stage that was a replica of the Temple of Pergamum, which in Revelation chapter 2, Jesus said is the seat of Satan, in his letter to the Church of Pergamum. Today, the Temple of Pergamum is in a museum in Berlin near the former Berlin Wall, which is why Barack Obama has been, I think, 5 times to Berlin since running for president and delivered speeches, famous speeches, near or at where the Berlin Wall was. From the day of Barack Obama's speech at his Democrat convention in Mile High Stadium in Denver, it is exactly 144 months to the day that Chadwick Boseman died, who starred in a movie about a mountain that gave the main character supernatural and spiritual powers. 144 months hints at the 144,000 that will be raptured as described in the book of Revelation. The 144,000 in the book of Revelation that symbolize those that will be raptured are mentioned twice in the book of Revelation. The first time they are mentioned, it is in context of the 4 angels that hold back the 4 winds at the 4 corners of the earth, and Colorado is one of the 4 corners states. The second time that the 144,000 are mentioned, they are on the top of a mountain. As was explained earlier, Barack Obama's name in Hebrew means lightning from heaven, and Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And the name Bama in Hebrew is actually the word for high place, which is a metaphor for heaven. Mountain is a metaphor for high place. In the Bible, the high places was where the ancient Jews would conduct their false idolatrous worship to false gods on the tops of mountains. And again, Lucifer fell from the high place, which was a metaphor for heaven. Chadwick Boseman died on the date September 28th in 2020, and he starred in a movie that was about a mountain that gave the character supernatural spiritual powers, which is Antichrist symbolism because the Antichrist will get supernatural spiritual powers from Satan. Lightning symbolizes the Antichrist. September 28th, the day that Chadwick Boseman died, the star in a movie about spiritual powers from a mountain, a high place, which is part of the name Barack Obama, lightning from a high place, was the day that the hockey team, the Tampa Bay Lightning, won the Stanley Cup. They beat the Dallas Stars. In Revelation chapter 12, it is said that the red dragon with his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them down to earth, which is symbolism for the fallen angels that are thrown down to earth with the red dragon by the archangel Michael. And in the Revelation 12 sign in the night sky, this was actually depicted by the constellation Draco, the dragon, and a prophetic meteor shower in the tail of the dragon constellation. Hence why the Tampa Bay Lightning, because lightning falling from heaven is why the Lightning beat the Dallas Stars 4-2 in Revelation chapter 12. The red dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth at the beginning of the final symbolic 42 months period of the Antichrist. And the reason for Dallas is because Dallas is known as the capital of evangelicalism, and God is communicating throughout his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. One of the main themes is judgment warning for the American church, specifically the American Evangelical Church of Laodicea. Dallas is known in the media as the capital of the American Evangelical Church of Laodicea. It is the home of the seminaries that churn out the pastors that teach the false, heretical, Gnostic doctrine of Reformed theology and Calvinism and free grace and sovereign grace and dispensationalism, which is what Jesus said is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, and says that he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. Today, the vast majority of Christians subscribe to this reformed, heretical, monergistic, Gnostic doctrine. Doctrine isn't unimportant. It is extremely important. It is related to our relationship with God. It is related to our love for God. It is deepened through right doctrine. It is not acceptable to say, I just love God. I don't need knowledge. In the Bible, knowledge of God is never separated from love for God. And make no mistake, the reason why God has given me a voice through these predictions is to prove what I have just said. From the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment, and the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. The day that the Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup, on the day that Chadwick Boseman died, was exactly 900 weeks after the company Tesla was founded. Tesla symbolizes electricity and lightning. Nikola Tesla is famous for his lightning experiments. Tesla is also part of the signs that God is using, including Elon Musk and SpaceX, to point to transhumanism and the mark of the Antichrist. Exactly 911 weeks after the founding of Tesla, which is symbolism for the 9/11 judgment warning in 2021. 9 symbolizes judgment, 11 symbolizes execution of judgment in the Bible, was the day that the first snake bite was given. That was December 14th, 2020, which was the exact midpoint between the 2 prophetic eclipses that passed and will pass over America. A prophetic and symbolic 7 years apart, which is symbolism for the symbolic 7 years period described in Daniel chapter 9. The Great American Eclipse in 2017 and the upcoming Great American Eclipse that will pass through America and pass over the city Dallas in 2024. The exact midpoint between these 2 eclipses was December 14th, 2020, exactly 911 weeks after the founding of Tesla, and Tesla is mark of the Antichrist symbolism. As it relates to SpaceX, the X in SpaceX is hinting at the Tav mark, which would have been the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist described in Ezekiel chapter 9. And these 2 eclipses will pass over each other exactly where the first one peaked. The second eclipse in 2024 will pass over the center of the first eclipse in 2017, exactly where it peaked in the center of the country. This will form a massive X over the country, which is in fact a Tav mark, which is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which is why this date of the first snake bite was exactly in the middle of this X that will be formed over America. The symbolic beginning of the snake bite mark of the Antichrist occurred in the exact middle date of these 2 eclipses that passed over each other in their exact middles in the middle of the country. The exact midpoint of this X that will be formed over America, which is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, was December 14th, 2020, and it was the day of the first snake bite that was given. It was the symbolic beginning of the snake bite mark of the Antichrist, which is not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. And the reason why God has given me a voice through the predictions being made in this video is to prove this. And it was exactly 911 weeks after Tesla was founded, which symbolizes lightning falling from heaven, which is what Barack Obama's name in Hebrew means. And also on December 14th, 2020, there was a 4.4 magnitude earthquake in Hawaii, the state that the 44th president grew up in. The 4.4 magnitude earthquake was 16 miles deep, which is 4 times 4, which hints at 44, and it was centered on the northwest flank of Hawaii's highest place, Mount Mauna Kea. Again, Bama in Hebrew means high place. It was centered on the northwest flank of the mountain, the highest place in Hawaii, and also northwest is symbolism for the Antichrist, because in Daniel chapter 8 it is said that the Antichrist comes from the north and the west. There are 2 Antichrists. The first Antichrist is Pope Francis, who is in Rome, and Rome is exactly northwest of Jerusalem. In Revelation chapter 13, the second beast Antichrist that speaks like a dragon will represent the first Antichrist. Barack Obama, the man that is famous because of his ability to deliver a speech, will represent and speak on behalf of the first Antichrist beast, Pope Francis. But returning to Chadwick Boseman, he died on the same day that the Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup, exactly 900 weeks after Tesla was founded, which is symbolism for lightning, which is confirmation that Chadwick Boseman is symbolism for high place because he starred in the movie about the mountain and died exactly 144 months after Barack Obama delivered his acceptance speech in Denver, Colorado. Also, Barack Obama said that the movie Black Panther was his favorite movie, in 2016. 16 is 4 times 4, which hints at the 44th president. And this is because of the woke, social justice, antichrist politics that this movie represented, as it was the first movie with an all-black cast. Also, on the day that Chadwick Boseman died was the day of Jackie Robinson Day in Major League Baseball, when every player on every team that plays on that day, every one of them wears jersey number 42 in commemoration of the famous baseball player Jackie Robinson, who wore jersey number 42. Chadwick Boseman starred in the movie 42, a movie about Jackie Robinson. The actor that starred in 42, a movie about Jackie Robinson, died coincidentally on Jackie Robinson Day. Normally, Jackie Robinson Day is on the first day of the season, but this was the year of COVID, and so it was held on September 28th that year. This movie 42 also co-stars Harrison Ford. The reason why 42 is relevant is because in Revelation chapter 12, it is said that the red dragon Antichrist will rule for a symbolic 42 months. It is only symbolic, or rather, we are already inside the 42 months, but that is explained in other videos. The red dragon is thrown down from heaven to earth by the archangel Michael at the beginning of the final 42 months period, the symbolic 42 months period. The red dragon is thrown down with his angels. The angels in Spanish is Los Angeles, and Jackie Robinson is famous for having played his career with the Dodgers, and the GOAT of baseball broadcasting, who had a son named Michael that fell from a high place and crashed in a helicopter, is famous for having spent his whole entire broadcast career with the Dodgers. Vin Scully began his career broadcasting for the Los Angeles Dodgers at the time that Jackie Robinson was playing for the Dodgers. And so Barack Obama's convention connects with 144 months to the death of Chadwick Boseman, which connects with 62 weeks to this prophetic doink called by Al Michaels, which is in turn exactly 40 weeks to the day of the prophetic signs on the flooded historic Soldier Field in Chicago, the home of Barack Obama, the Antichrist. And this prophetic significance of all of these signs in this flooded field in Chicago, which is absolutely amazing, needs to be explained in another video. But again, as was explained earlier, the flooded historic Soldier Field was a prophetic 40 days after the death of Vin Scully, which was 7 days after the historic, epic, prophetic flooding in St. Louis. And again, in Genesis, it is a 7 days warning to the flood, and then the flood waters increased for 40 days. Vin Scully's death ties into the extremely prophetic, historic, and destructive flooding in St. Louis 7 days before his death on the date 7/26, and 7/26, July 26, was exactly 926 weeks after the only other time a blood moon lunar eclipse was over a championship sports game. On October 27th, 2004. This was the day that the Boston Red Sox broke their sports curse, which is Antichrist symbolism, when they beat St. Louis in St. Louis 4-0 after having swept the Yankees 4-0 in 2004, which was all hinting at the 44th president, the Antichrist, who just a few days after this was elected to Washington, D.C. for the first time as the senator from Illinois. This blood moon lunar eclipse was the only blood moon to ever appear during a World Series game, and it was seen from the stadium over the Gateway Arch. The Gateway Arch, the famous Gateway Arch in St. Louis, is seen from the stadium, and this blood moon was seen over this. And the reason for St. Louis is because of this Gateway Arch, because in the Bible, judgment symbolically begins at the gates. St. Louis is known as the gateway to the west, and this is symbolized by this gateway arch. The judgment period of the Antichrist on the nation will begin at the gates. Hence why this prophetic sign, this blood moon over the gateway arch, when the Boston Red Sox broke their sports curse by sweeping St. Louis 4-0 after having swept the Yankees 4-0 in 2004, just a few days before the 44th president was first elected to Washington, D.C. It was the symbolic beginning of his political career in the nation's capital, and judgment begins at the gates. The reason for 926 weeks is because H926, the 926th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, is the word to make afraid, to be terrified. And speaking of the number 926, God gave Noah a 7 days warning to load the ark before the flood judgment, and 7 days after this historic, epic, prophetic, destructive flooding in St. Louis was the day that Vin Scully died, the GOAT of baseball broadcasting, on the same day as the abortion vote in Kansas. And this day, August 2nd, was 926 days after Kansas City won the AFC Championship in 2020, making their first Super Bowl in 50 years on the day of the prophetic earthquake in Hutchinson, Kansas. It's explained in other videos, but God is pointing to Ann Hutchinson, the leader of the Free Grace theological movement at the spiritual founding of America in the Boston colony, who was banished from the Boston colony for her free grace theology. The number 50 and Hutchinson symbolizes the church, and this is judgment warning for the church, and these extremely important prophetic signs are explained in much more detail in other videos, and so I won't go off onto a half-hour tangent explaining it right here. But this is one of the major reasons for knowing that the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day is sovereign grace and free grace, which comes in the packages of Calvinism and dispensationalism, which both lead to the heretical Gnostic doctrine of once saved, always saved. And Jesus said he hates this Nicolaitan doctrine and is coming to make war on those that with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. Make no mistake, the reason for why God has given me the voice through these predictions is to prove what I have just said. This is a serious warning for Christians, the vast majority of which believe these heretical doctrines, and doctrine is extremely important. Knowledge of God is extremely important. It is not all right to just say, I just love God. The Bible never separates our knowledge of God and our love for God. It always combines these things. And it is sound doctrine, it is right doctrine that deepens our knowledge of God. And when our knowledge of God is deepened, then that enables our love for God to deepen. Philippians chapter 1, verse 9. And it is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with knowledge and all discernment. Make sure you watch the video on this channel titled 23 Church Signs Video. Arguably, it is the most important video on this channel. I will leave a link to this video and other videos on other channels that explain doctrine in the description box below this video. As was explained, the 926th Hebrew word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word for to be terrified, to make afraid. For example, this word is first used in Genesis when Joseph's brothers first realize that Joseph is their brother and are terrified of him. For Joseph's brothers, it was a sudden, unexpected shock that made them terrified. As was explained now, all of this is connecting to Kansas and the vote to keep abortion legal on the same day that the GOAT of baseball broadcasting died, and it connects to the blood moon over the Gateway Arch over St. Louis, and the other blood moon over the AFC Championship game in Kansas City, and both of these blood moons connect with 926 weeks and 926 days to this July 26th date and August 2nd and the vote in Kansas and the death of the GOAT of baseball broadcasting. 926 days back from the vote in Kansas on the day of the death of the GOAT of baseball broadcasting was the AFC Championship game in Kansas City, the prophetic one where they went to the Super Bowl for the first time in 50 years, on the same day of the third of 3 prophetic earthquakes in Hutchinson, Kansas, and 926 weeks exactly back from the flooding, which was 7 days before the vote in Kansas, and 7 days is prophetic because of the 7 days warning in the account of Noah's flood. 926 weeks exactly back from the flooding on July 26th in St. Louis was the blood moon over St. Louis and the stadium in the World Series game. Again, 926 is to be afraid, to be made afraid, to be terrified. And so the reason for this is because the date 726 once again hints at 726, the 726th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for rapture. The rapture will be on October 12th, 2023, 40 days after the date it is predicted that there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth on September 2nd, 2023. I should say a prophetic 40 days. On 9/26 in 2022, NASA used its probe named DART to slam into an asteroid. This was a prophetic 188 weeks exactly after the extremely prophetic asteroid sign we received on February 19th, 2019. But this sign and the 188 weeks relevance is explained in another video. But incidentally, because of this connection, it was expected before the launch, before it was even known about this DART probe, that there would be something relevant to an asteroid occurring on the date 9/26, September 26th, 2022. September 26th and its relevance to an asteroid was known since the summer, since June or July of 2021. In other words, this was predicted ahead of time. In other words, this slamming of DART into the asteroid was predicted ahead of time. When the rapture occurs and Christians that thought they would be raptured are left behind, they will be made terrified. They will be afraid. Like Joseph's brothers, they will be suddenly shocked and made terrified. Likewise, the events that will be going on in the world on that day will make the entire world afraid and terrified. Kansas is supposed to be a church-attending, conservative red state. And so, therefore, their voting to keep abortion legal is a massive prophetic sign that is confirming that this is the end of the road for America and the American church in its current form. And again, their vote to keep abortion legal ties to Vin Scully on the same day that he died, the goat of baseball broadcasting, who is symbolism for Revelation chapter 12, which is about a woman giving birth to a child. Also, the goat of baseball broadcasting died at the age of 94, and this isn't the first instance in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections in which he has used the numbers 9 and 4 together as symbolism for the Antichrist, because for one thing, 9 plus 4 equals 13, which is symbolism for the Antichrist from the Bible. Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 2 13th days of the months, and the 2 Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. Also, 9 times 4 equals 36, a number that symbolizes the Antichrist, which in Bible prophecy is symbolized by 666. 9 times 4 equals 36, which is 6 times 6, and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6, and also the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666, and 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. And this is why the GOAT of baseball broadcasting died at the age of 94. All right, this is the end of part 3 of this 4-part video series. If you've made it this far, I assume that you have found the information interesting, and therefore you will want to watch part 4. Part 4 is completely different than the other 3 parts. I will leave a link to Part 4 in the description box below this video. Part 4 is titled Kobe Bryant's Helicopter Crash equals NASA's helicopter will crash on Mars on April 9th. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. These so-called aliens will make Pope Francis their ambassador for the world. The Pope is the first of the 2 antichrists. Catholicism isn't the Bible and isn't Christianity. Catholicism is ancient pagan religion presented in a wrapper to make it appear like it is Christianity. Catholicism is the wolf in sheep's clothing. There will likely be a massive Mary ghost that the whole world will see, but it will be demonic deception. Praying to Mary is praying to demons. God absolutely hates the pagan worship and traditions within Roman Catholicism. The New Age or New Spirituality or Consciousness religion is evil deception from Satan. The supernatural experiences that Catholics experience that confirm for them that Catholicism is true are demonic deception. The same applies to all other false religions and New Age spirituality. In 2 Thessalonians, it says we get the deception we ask for. But these spiritual experiences are demonic deception for those that refuse to love the truth and so be saved. In other words, it is foolish to rely on spiritual or mystical experiences, and those that do are asking for demonic deception. Satan is very real, he is very powerful, he has enormous power, and he doesn't fool people as a being with 2 horns and a tail. He presents himself and his powers as an angel of light. New Age near-death experiences are deception from Satan. There are also many near-death experiences of hell. Why would you believe the New Ager ones and not the ones of hell? The supernatural highs from yoga and meditation are demonic deception. They are the counterfeit Holy Spirit. Miraculous healing as a result of New Age practices such as Reiki, crystal work, yoga, etc. are demonic and from the power of Satan. There is absolutely no New Age or collective consciousness type of explanation for how these predictions were known ahead of time. They were known ahead of time through Bible prophecy and watching for God's prophetic signs. Jesus was not just another supposed enlightened master like the supposedly enlightened Buddha. Jesus was God incarnate, and he is the only way to eternal life and to God the Father. The New Age religion and New Spirituality is in truth worship of the self. It is transgression of the first commandment, and it is the height of false idolatrous, false God worship. We are not God. We are not part of God. God is holy, which is a Hebrew word that means separate from. The big deception in the end times will be New Age spirituality, and this satanic deception will merge with Catholicism. The purpose for these predictions, the reason why God has given me a voice through these predictions, is to prove the things that I am saying. The New Age religion is deception from Satan designed to keep someone in their pride and for repenting for their sins, and for admitting that they need to be forgiven and that they need a Savior, Lord Jesus Christ. New Age religion is essentially atheistic spirituality, and New Age spirituality and New Agers are essentially narcissistic, immature children that are rebelling against a disciplinary father. Contrary to what New Agers and Muslims say, the Bible has not been tainted or changed. This is a lie from Satan. There is no evidence for this. And in fact, the evidence is overwhelmingly to the contrary. If you hold the New Age belief that life is for learning lessons, and that whatever we supposedly don't learn in this life, we will supposedly learn in the supposed next reincarnation, and if you believe that there is no need for justice, that Adolf Hitler and the child rapist and murderer will get off the hook, not only do you have a sick, twisted view of the world and your values are morally repugnant, and not only are you an enemy of the true God, which is the God of the Bible, the God of Israel, but you will go to hell unless you plead for mercy for your sin and believe in your Savior, Jesus Christ. The New Age Hindu belief that all religions are authentic expressions of the truth is a lie from Satan. The following statement is not a political statement regarding immigration. The overwhelming level of immigration of peoples from other cultures to Western countries was designed by Satan as judgment from God in order to expunge the West of its traditional Judeo-Christian values in exchange for multiculturalism and an ethos of intolerance of intolerance. This credo of inclusivism of the cult of the political left, combined with the worship of science and backed by pseudoscientific assertions regarding physics, made for fertile ground for the Hindu belief that all religions are different paths up the same mountain, and fertile ground for the Hindu religious practices such as meditation and yoga. This New Age religion that is leading to the soon-coming one-world religion in which all religions come together in the spirit of peace is the Antichrist religion. There is a spiritual reality behind the material world that we see. The wages for sin is death. Sin means to miss the mark. No one is good, all have sinned. Because of sin, people are captives of the ruler of this world, Satan. People's souls belong to Satan, whose power over people is death. God took the form of a man, Jesus Christ, and paid the ransom that is owed to the ruler of this world. Through Christ's death and resurrection, he defeated sin and he overcame Satan's power in death. It is through Christ and his Spirit that it is possible for everyone to be forgiven of their sin, and we can have eternal life if we choose it. We can choose to follow Jesus out of captivity from sin and Satan, or we can choose to reject this and remain a slave to this world, sin, and to Satan. If one rejects Jesus Christ, after they die, they will pay the price for their sin in hell, and then they will die the second death, and their soul will cease to exist. Believing in Christ means much more than simple intellectual agreement. It means to repent of sin and completely commit one's life and become a willing slave to Jesus and his kingdom. Jesus said we need to be born again, which implies a death of the self and a death to this world. Believing in Jesus implies living out one's faith through taking action that typically involves risk and sacrifice. This demonstration of faith through action is what it means to have faith and to believe in Jesus. Some Christians will tell you otherwise, but they are deceived and they ignore countless passages in the Bible. Obviously, when these predictions come to pass, you will know that you should watch all of the videos on this channel, beginning with the videos that are linked to in the description box below this video. I strongly recommend not going through the videos on this channel in random fashion, selecting titles that may be interesting, but rather I strongly recommend following my recommendations that are listed in the description box below this video. This channel is not a daily or weekly update on the latest news. Rather, this channel is a library that has documented God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. Hopefully you at least found this introduction video to be interesting, and if so, please leave a like and upvote the video, and please consider sharing the video. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com, or PredictionsProveIt.com, and also check out the other information that I have linked to on the website. You should also pause this video right now and make a note of my other social media outlets. You never know when you will need them, and you might not be able to find them later. Also, if you want to download these videos as podcasts, I now have a podcast channel at Podbean, which is named Predictions Prove It.